we were talking about the first, but I mean, the nudity, like we were saying, is behind that is a shit ton of work as well. Like, I was reading about your devil training, and it's 3 months of training, 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. How intense has that been for you, and how has that shaped your own relationship with your own body image, would you say?
It's been that's been an interesting journey. I mean, I took that on, like the big kind of like physical change happened actually when the show got cancelled and then we came back to Netflix, and it wasn't, no one asked me to do that. That was something that I took on myself because it's something me and my trainer Paolo had been talking about for a while, and he was like, I really feel like you could really, because I was someone who went to the gym but didn't really have a lot of goals and didn't really kind of, I was just kind of content and like, I'd still like drink and eat the same stuff and all that. So I wasn't fully benefiting from the experience of all the time I was putting in there. And he said, look, if you really commit to this, we could get you into like men's health shape, was like the quote that we were talking about. And I knew what he meant by that, but I also knew how much fucking hard work that was. And I'd had this like beautiful excuse for the last few years that I was just too busy. But then when the show was cancelled and there was this kind of like period of time where we weren't sure what was going to happen to it, Paolo said, look, if the show gets saved, let's do a bet. If the show gets saved, you'll do the men's health like push. And I was like, okay. Thinking, well, I don't think it's going to get saved. And then of course, it did get saved, and the first call I got was from Paolo going, are you ready?
And you were like, I'm not ready.
I'm like, oh my God, let's go for it. But that was an incredible experience because, again, I learned about myself that I can have that discipline, I can push for these things and whatever. In the greater scheme of things, what has it done about like being body conscious and all that? I think there's a danger tipping point when you get really into that space of getting too body conscious. And too into it, and actually it can be unhealthy. But I strongly encourage people to get as fit and healthy as possible, whatever, because I just think the ultimate mental side of it is that you will feel better about yourself. Working out does help with your mental health, but if all your life is working out, then that's going to screw with your mental health. It's weird actually having this conversation now, because I was on a flight a couple of days ago and I watched this documentary that Michael Phelps had made about mental health and about Olympic athletes, and about how they have this singular focus, this obsessive focus, for 4 years to get to this thing, and then it's just gone like that. And even if you've won, or even if you've won or lost, it still leaves you with this emptiness. And I think that there is a danger, when people really obsess about working out, and you start going on social media and like looking at people's bodies and how kind of shredded and all that sort of stuff. That is quite a toxic world as well. Like the best thing I did in the last 12 months was give up smoking. Because believe it or not, whilst I was like getting in ripped up shape and all that, I was still, very good at smoking.
How did you do that?
I got away with it. That's the thing. That's the thing about smoking, isn't it? People get away with it for as long as they can get away with it, and then they start to really feel it. And I think as I hit 40 and I was still smoking, I thought to myself, you've got to stop this at some point. And that was all, all of these things all tie into the same kind of like fitness journey and all of that. And it's like losing one vice at a time, and just, and slight self-improvement rather than going for these huge and massive goals all the time, doing it all at once. No one can do that. So I got fit, and then I thought, I like staying fit, and how can I get fitter and not go to the gym more? Why don't I give up smoking? And that was a mental challenge, but I got there.
That's a whole other level of willpower, isn't it? Did it teach you that, like, that was the ultimate willpower in a way, to give that up?
Oh, for sure. And I got help as well. I was like, I've spoke to a therapist for years now. I think it's one of the most helpful tools that I found in my life, having a therapist. But through my therapist, because we talked about the fact I want to give up smoking and why do I find it so hard and all those things. He put me in touch with someone that was like an addictions doctor, and has helped, more often than not, helps people give up smoking. And I went down that route, and I think I needed some help to do it, because I completely admire people that can do it just go cold turkey and do it. Yeah, all credit to you, but I knew that I wasn't that person. And having someone talk to me and like, rather than point out, oh, well, smoking's silly and smoking's this and smoking's that, I don't understand why you do it. Rather than that, having someone point out and go, this has been your friend for 20 years and I totally get it. and what are the things that you're going to miss about it, and what you're going to benefit from, and just breaking it down from a much kind of like friendlier perspective, where you're not feeling like you've just been self-destruct for 25 years.
Yeah.
And just understand, coming from a different place on it, that really helped me. But it's almost a year now, and I still I was just filming something in New York, and there was a few times during that process where I thought, God,
I'm just desperate for one.
Just to smell it in the street, and it's in the air, and like it's just certain places, and I don't know, but I did it a lot for my children, but I did it mainly because it was at a point in my life where I just thought, I've got to do this now. No one else is going to do it for me. That was the conclusion that I reached.
That is true. Sometimes you got to do it for yourself, right? And I think as well, it's amazing you can sit here, especially as a British guy, and say that you've gone to a therapist and it's been really beneficial for you, because I think there's still quite a lot of stigma around talking around that kind of stuff, and especially being kind of like a British lab where we don't talk about our feelings, and we always put it to the back burner. How much of a release has that been from you, and what's maybe the biggest lesson you've taken away from having a therapist?
All of those things that you just touched on, basically. I mean, I think inherently someone who is not, again, like I talked about before, I don't like confrontation. I don't like talking about difficult things, and I think being British and culturally being British, that's all right, because you don't need to.
Yeah.
But it doesn't deal with anything, and the older I've gotten, the more stuff I need to deal with. It doesn't get easier; it gets harder in that sense. You have children, and your responsibility, and your emotional responsibility just gets kind of like spread. And I find it incredibly. Even when I feel like I don't need to go and talk to my therapist, that's often the best therapy sessions that I have, because it's like, oh, I didn't even think that I was feeling this way about this. But being able to talk about it hasn't fixed anything, but I feel better about it. And it's not kind of stewing inside of me. And we'll talk about this next week when we talk. And it's given me, I feel braver to talk about my feelings. I don't feel judged about it. Because that's the other thing as well. I think having someone independent of anyone else in your life, where you don't have to kind of dilute any of the information that you're giving to your therapist about how you feel. You can just give it straight up. You're not worrying about hurting people's feelings. You're not worrying about, any of that sensitivities. You're just, God, I just need to talk about this thing. And I've found that incredibly helpful.
Finding that outlet where you can have an unfiltered conversation with someone, be it a therapist, or even some people can find that with people in their lives. I always find that even if I'm trying to have an unfiltered conversation, I will then have there'll be a little tiny filter that comes in somewhere on the line. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to tell you that part of the story, but I focus on this part.
Yeah, of course.
And it's so freeing, isn't it? And so beneficial, and one of the best things you can do for yourself, right?
Absolutely. And that's the key thing. It's like yourself. It's like one thing that I've learned in this whole experience of whatever is you need to spend some time checking in with yourself, because if you don't, then things catch up with you later down the road. And that's my biggest sort of takeaway from doing therapy. It's a forced, it's a forced kind of intervention. And I don't use intervention like in the way that everyone thinks about it, but it's just like intervening with myself once a week to go, by the way, you need to just go and check in and just talk about these things that you're collecting and processing quietly in the back of your head. And it's a privilege to be able to go and do that once a week as well, because it can be quite an expensive pursuit. But you don't have to do it once a week. You can do it once a month. You can do it, whenever. But my thing is that everyone assumes therapy, certainly in the UK, in my experience, was that therapy is for when things are broken and you need to fix them. And for me, it's not about that. Therapy is about trying to navigate your way through life so you don't keep breaking things.
Yeah, and gives you the tools, right? And a new level of equipment.
It gives you the tools, exactly. And so you learn not to, hopefully, not repeat behave, in things that have been destructive. And just having a better kind of sense of self and sense of another voice, a diplomat. Someone who can hold you accountable, because we're not very good at holding ourselves accountable a lot of the time. And I think we all, like, if we're really honest with ourselves sometimes, we know the answers, but we're too scared to ask ourselves the question, and that's what therapy does for me. It forces someone to ask the question I'm too scared to ask myself.